the hearing today, the hearing of the special counsel who investigated Joe Biden's taking classified documents with him when he left the vice presidency and having documents since he's been president, I guess, that wound up in his possession away from where they should be. The person who investigated that is a nasty little bastard called Robert Hur. I call him a nasty little bastard because of the editorializing he did in his final report regarding the investigation of Joe Biden. These Christian devils are after any scrap. They're like hungry fucking dogs in a wood someplace and come across rotted meat from some creature that died, and they just start tearing at it. This is what these Christian fascists are doing where it concerns the Biden family. But it's not going to work. You know, in order to convince the public that there is a criminal loose in the land, you first have to provide evidence of the crime. And there is no such thing where it concerns the Bidens. Hunter Biden, yeah, he fucked up on his taxes for which he's going to pay. He already paid the money, but for which he will be assessed some sort of a penalty, right? But this going after Joe Biden is sickening. But the one thing it demonstrates very clearly to me is the degree to which and the depth to which these Christian fascists have sunk into the mire, into the slop that they have created. They will do anything to try to ensure that their Lord and Master, their dictator, Donald Trump, will once again occupy the Oval Office where he can end representative government in this country and replace it with Trumpian dictatorship. And these Christian fascists, these white males and white females too, I don't know, somehow these women have, these Christian fascist Republican women, they would call themselves Republican, have completely given in to this rapist son of a bitch, Donald Trump. It's just astonishing to me. Especially this Nancy Mace freak who represents one of the districts in South Carolina. I may get to what she said on This Week with George Stephanopoulos this past Sunday. But this morning, before the hearing started, I was watching a bit of Morning Joe, MSNBC. And Joe almost lost his shit, literally, on the program this morning in talking about this Robert Hur and what he was going to testify about and who would be doing the questioning today. And he launched into a rant about Robert Hur, the special counsel, that had him using some pretty rough language for television. And his wife, Mika Brzezinski, freaking out, trying to get him to stop. And what prompted it, what Robert Hur did the day before he's to testify, he resigns from the Department of Justice and had been working with GOP operatives before this congressional testimony. Now, this was a calculated move on the part of Hur, because had he shown up as a special counsel, he would have been bound by rules put in place by the Department of Justice concerning people who are working for the Department of Justice and are called to testify before a congressional hearing. There are certain rules in place to say what that DOJ person can and cannot say, the parameters within which he's got to stay when he or she gives testimony before a congressional committee. But by resigning the day before, Robert Hur removed all those restrictions so he could say any fucking lie, anything he wanted to say. Well, that's what got Scarborough completely flipped out. Now, I'm not laughing at Joe. I've said before, I've watched Joe Scarborough's metamorphosis from being a hardcore right-wing member of Congress from the Florida Panhandle, very hardcore, right-wing, conservative, not a neo-fascist. He's also, I think he's also a Christian. He's a Catholic, I believe. I've watched that metamorphosis from Joe Scarborough going from that into somebody who is constantly amazed at the depth of depravity and sickness and mental insanity that the Republican Party to which he used to belong has devolved. And I think what really pisses off Joe Scarborough the most is that he wants to continue to be a Republican, and which I wish him well, but not this Republican Party, not this rotting corpse that continues to walk around dripping maggots all over the place. No. Joe Scarborough, I don't think would ever be a Christian fascist. I don't think he would be a political fascist. I think he's just a conservative, deeply so. But Scarborough lost it this morning. He really did. Well, MSNBC on their website, they say that he flipped out. He did more than flipped out. He was focusing on Mr. Hur's penchant for making these personal observations, these little editorial bullshit comments in his final report that were totally unrelated to his investigation. He wasn't charged with finding out if Joe Biden had a poor memory. He wasn't tasked with finding out if Joe Biden couldn't speak without stuttering. He was tasked with finding out whether or not there was any criminal activity involved in Joe Biden taking certain classified or top secret or whatever the fuck they were documents home with him. That was his charge. Scarborough called this guy out and questioned what he is expecting in return from a possible second Trump presidency. You go, Joe. No shit. And I think what he's thinking about, remember John Yoo, that miserable son of a bitch who worked in the Justice Department for George W. Bush, and it was you who made the determination that the United States could torture people in order to get information from them at various so-called black sites around the world and at our detention camp in Guantanamo, Cuba. You remember John Yoo? And how was he rewarded? With a professorship at, Stanford, I believe? I cannot believe that Stanford University allows this miserable John Yoo, a man who decided on his own and passed it on to George W. Bush, that ignorant, bumbling fool, that the United States, after John Yoo's decision, could incorporate torture into the way we handle detainees. Torture. Do you remember partial drowning? Oh, I know what the euphemism was. Waterboarding. Sounds like something you do when you go surfing. Partial drowning is what it was. Is. So Scarborough was referencing that, even though he didn't bring up John Yoo's name. He wanted to know what Robert Hur, this miserable little bastard, is going to get if Trump gets a second presidency. Scarborough began by saying this, quote, "I wonder what pasture he will walk off into. Kind of wander off and say, you know, Joe Biden, I noticed he didn't really tie his tie very well. The tie knot suggested that maybe he has arthritis in his left thumb," end quote. And immediately Brzezinski interjected. She said, well, where are you going with this, Joe? And then Joe said this, quote, "This guy says such random shit." And immediately Brzezinski said, "Joe, stop." And at first she covered her own mouth, and then she tried unsuccessfully to reach over and cover her husband's mouth. And I'm sitting there almost coughing on my River Moon coffee. I'm just sitting there going, oh, you go, Joe. Don't stop there. This guy says such random shit. I love it. But Scarborough continued, mimicking her as Brzezinski tried to get him to stop again. Scarborough says, quote, "Oh, he's a kindly old man who could not remember his son's birthday." And Mika is trying to get him to stop. Stop, Joe. But Scarborough kept talking. He doesn't show a whole lot of, I don't want to use the word respect, but he doesn't like it when Mika starts to try to override what Joe is saying, I guess is the best way to put it. So Scarborough went on. He said, quote, "I don't know exactly, does he hope he gets a judgeship? I think he does. I think he hopes he gets a judgeship if Donald Trump gets elected again. He's trying out. He humiliated himself with that display," end quote. Well, once again, if you and I need any proof whatsoever of the degree to which Donald Trump has utterly and absolutely poisoned, you talk about poison in the bloodstream of this country, this rotten bastard Donald Trump has injected the political corpus of this country, along with the Christian nutfucks. Trump has injected them with the most vile, poisonous shit possible. To the point, and if you watched any to the point of this congressional hearing this morning, if you watched any of it, my God, these white Christian males and females on this committee are just hell-bent on seeing who can give Trump the best blowjob in return for what? What do they think Trump is going to give them? Christian fascists, everyone, who have zero respect for the rule of law. They have zero respect for the foundation of this country. I know. I'm not going to get into the foundational fuck-ups, like destroying the native population. Yes, that was done. Like slavery. Yes, that was done. And I think people of goodwill, white people of goodwill, since then have tried very slowly to hold themselves accountable for the things that were done. When the framers put together, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and goddamn near every one of them owned other human beings. And the great Thomas Jefferson was raping one of his. Oh, you don't call it rape? Jesus. I got way off track there. I don't mean to rip the founders. Their inadequacies are evident in what they said as opposed to what they did. The documents, however, the Constitution of the United States, I believe it. I have believed in ever since I knew there was such a document. That's all we have. And the shame, the crime, the horror of it is the framers never suspected that a piece of shit like Donald Trump would rise up out of the filth and completely take over the minds of these miserable goddamn Christian devils. How easy it was for Trump. How easy it was. Which shows me, among other things, the absolute weakness and bullshit of this Christian faith, so screeched and screamed about by these Christian fascists. What a fucking joke. How disgusting. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. The Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.